virus took a lot of things from us. It took years, it took celebrations. It took people we loved before we even had a chance to say goodbye. And it took music, not just the artists, but the albums they were building, the sessions they had booked, the songs they had already started writing.
Whatever our chance to be.
Tonight we're going inside 10 stories the world glossed over. 10 R&B and soul legends who died during the pandemic with unfinished work still waiting in the studio. These are the songs that never got finished, the albums nobody got to hear. This is Lost Soul. Number 10, Manu Dibango, Soul Makossa, 1972. Manu Dibango was the first known celebrity in the world to die from COVID-19. Let that land, not just a musician, not just a legend. The first confirmed public figure anywhere on the planet to be taken by this virus. He died on March 24, 2020 in Paris, France. He was 86 years old, and the world barely had time to understand what was happening before he was gone. Born in Cameroon in 1933, Dibango left home at 15 years old on a scholarship to study classical piano in Paris. His family expected him to return educated and proper. Instead, he heard jazz drifting out of the cafes at night, and that was it. He was never the same. By the early 1950s, he was playing saxophone in the clubs of Paris. By 1972, he had recorded a song that would travel across every ocean on earth. He called it Soul Makossa. Released on a 7-inch single in Cameroon, the song blended Cameroonian funk with African rhythm and a saxophone line so infectious it felt like it was born in the body, not written on paper. The B-side. Nobody expected the B-side. American DJs found it. Club owners started importing copies directly from Africa. It shot to number 35 on the Billboard Hot 100. And then Michael Jackson heard it. The hook from Soul Makossa, Dibango's distinctive chant, appeared in the bridge of Wanna Be Startin' Something from Thriller in 1983. Dibango sued Jackson for copyright infringement. They settled out of court. Years later, Beyoncé sampled the same chant in her 2011 song, Sorry. Dibango sued again. They settled again. The man's voice lived in the DNA of two of the biggest pop songs ever recorded, and most people didn't know his name. By 2020, at 86 years old, Dibango was still active, still traveling, still performing. He had already recorded his most recent album, Eminem, in 2017, and there were reports of new collaborative work being discussed when the virus swept through Paris in early March. He checked into hospital, and within days he was gone. His family released a statement. He passed away on the morning of Tuesday, March 24, 2020. The world had not yet learned how to grieve during lockdown. His funeral was small. The music he had not yet finished stayed unfinished. A man who sued Michael Jackson twice. A man who gave the world the sound that disco built on. And the first celebrity taken by the thing that would change everything. Manu Dibango. Number 9, Bishop Rance Allen. Something About the Name Jesus, 1972.
Something about the name Jesus.
The day before Bishop Rance Allen died, October 30, 2020, his group released a new song on every digital platform in the world. He never got to see a single stream count.
Sweetest name I know.
Rance Allen was born in Monroe, Michigan in 1948, one of 12 children in a family where music was survival, not a career choice. He started playing piano at 9 years old. By 12, he was already an ordained minister. By 21, he had formed the Rance Allen Group with his brothers Tom and Steve and signed to Stax Records.
Shut up in my bones.
Stax Records, the same label that housed Otis Redding and Isaac Hayes, the epicenter of Southern soul. And Rance Allen walked in and turned it into church. He called it contemporary gospel, but what it really was the rawest, most combustible fusion of rock, soul, and the Holy Spirit the industry had ever heard.
And it's all because there's something, yeah.
His signature grunts and squalls, that unhinged, full-body vocal delivery, inspired an entire generation of gospel artists. Kirk Franklin, Fred Hammond, John P. Key, all of them pointed back to Rance Allen as the man who showed them it was possible to be anointed and dangerous at the same time. In 1978, the group crossed over to the R&B charts with I Belong to You, a top 30 R&B hit. Huey Lewis of Huey Lewis and the News called Ain't No Need of Crying one of his all-time top 5 favorite soul songs in a 2019 Rolling Stone interview. In 2015, Rance Allen performed at the White House for Barack and Michelle Obama, and he was nowhere near finished.
Praise him now!
At the time of his death, there were confirmed plans, documented in his official estate statement, for Rance Allen to record a brand new gospel album featuring P.J. Morton, Charley Wilson, and Kirk Franklin, 3 of the most important voices in contemporary black music. All of them ready, all of them confirmed.
Sweet name.
Then COVID-19 hit. The project was put on hold. Allen was admitted to Heartland ProMedica Hospital in Sylvania, Ohio, for a medical procedure. He died in the early hours of October 31, 2020. He was 71 years old.
Yes.
His estate statement confirmed it plainly. At the time of his death, there were plans in the works for Allen to record a new gospel album with contributions from P.J. Morton, Charley Wilson, and Kirk Franklin before the COVID-19 pandemic put the project on hold. One day, nay before he died, the Rance Allen Group's final recording, I'm So Glad It's Christmas, went live on every streaming platform. He released music on October 30th. He was gone on October 31st. In 2023, 3 years after his death, his classic Something About the Name Jesus was certified gold by the RIA. 500,000 sales. The man who turned Stax Records into a sanctuary. The man Kirk Franklin studied. The man who was one session away from his greatest album, gone.
Yes, I know.
Listen, 90% of you watching these videos right now ain't subscribed yet. If these stories are blowing your mind, imagine what you're missing. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, and join the R&B fans who never miss a Groove Lens upload. Number 8, Adam Schlesinger, Stacy's Mom, 2003. Adam Schlesinger was the kind of songwriter most people had never heard of and who had written songs they would never forget. He died on April 1, 2020. He was 52 years old. 52. The virus was not supposed to be taking people like Adam Schlesinger. He was young, he was healthy, he was in the middle of the most creatively fertile period of his career. Schlesinger co-founded Fountains of Wayne in 1996, the New Jersey power pop band whose 2003 hit Stacy's Mom became one of the most recognizable songs of the early 2000s. It peaked at number 21 on the Billboard Hot 100. The music video starred model Rachel Hunter and became one of the most played videos on MTV that year. But Stacy's Mom was just the surface. Schlesinger also wrote the title track for the 1996 Tom Hanks film, That Thing You Do, the Oscar and Golden Globe nominated song that sounded so authentically like a 1960s hit single that audiences weren't sure it was fictional. He wrote over 100 songs for the CW series Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. He won 3 Emmy Awards, a Grammy, nominated for an Oscar and a Tony. He was what the industry calls a quadruple threat, except nobody called him that because he was always working behind the scenes. In the spring of 2020, Schlesinger was finishing the score for a new off-Broadway musical written with comedian Sarah Silverman. It was called The Bedwetter. The show had already been cast. Tony winners Linda Lavin and Stephanie J. Block were set to star. The production was scheduled to open for previews on April 25, 2020. Adam Schlesinger was hospitalized March 19th, tested positive for COVID, placed on a ventilator. He never came off it. He died 11 days before his musical was supposed to open its doors. The Bedwetter would eventually be staged years later. But Adam Schlesinger never heard it with an audience, never heard the applause. He left behind 2 daughters, Sadie and Claire. He left behind a catalog that few people could name, but almost everyone has heard. And he left behind a stage show, his breakthrough into American musical theater, that he would never see performed. Number 7, Ellis Marsalis Jr., 12-zit, 1958 legacy. On the same day Adam Schlesinger died in New York, April 1, 2020, a man named Ellis Marsalis Jr. died in New Orleans. He was 85 years old. Most people reading this know his sons. Branford Marsalis, the Grammy-winning saxophonist. Wynton Marsalis, arguably the greatest living jazz trumpeter. Delphio Marsalis, trombonist. Jason Marsalis, drummer. Ellis Marsalis raised 4 sons who all became professional jazz musicians. All 4. That is not a family. That is a dynasty. And Ellis was the patriarch. A pianist, educator, and composer from New Orleans, Ellis Marsalis spent more than 50 years shaping jazz not just through his own recordings, but through the hundreds of students he taught at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. His students included Harry Connick Jr., Terrence Blanchard, Nicholas Payton. He did not just make music, he made musicians. By 2020, at 85 years old, Ellis Marsalis was still teaching, still mentoring, still playing. The virus found him in the spring. He was hospitalized with pneumonia-related complications from COVID-19. His son Branford posted on Instagram, "Our father Ellis Marsalis Jr. died tonight from the complications of COVID-19. He was a giant of a musician and educator, and above all, He was a great father and human being. Ellis Marsalis had recorded dozens of albums as a leader. He had several more sessions and collaborations discussed for 2020. Plans his family confirmed were on the table before the pandemic hit. None of them happened. What the world lost wasn't just a pianist. It was the man who built a dynasty, who proved that greatness could be taught, passed down, kept alive. New Orleans lost one of its own. Jazz lost a teacher no one can replace. Number 6, Ronald Collis Bell Celebration, 1980. Robert Cool Bell said it simply, "My brother wrote most of the material. All those horn lines, 90% of them were his." Ronald Collis Bell was the musical genius inside Kool and the Gang. Most people know the group. Celebration, Jungle Boogie, Get Down on It, Ladies Night, Fresh, Cherish. 31 gold and platinum albums. Over 80 million records sold worldwide. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And the man who wrote and arranged most of it was not the one whose name was in the band's title. We gon' celebrate your party with you. Ronald Bell died on September 9, 2020, in the U.S. Virgin Islands. He was 68 years old. The cause was confirmed to be COVID-19. But here is what makes this story cut even deeper. It's a celebration. Ronald Bell had been working on a new album. In the summer of 2020, inspired by Joe Biden's presidential campaign and the phrase "pursuit of happiness," he conceived a complete album called Perfect Union. He wrote it around themes of world peace, unity, and harmony, the most hopeful album of his career. He did not live to see it released. His brother Kool, along with original members George Brown and Dennis Thomas, decided to honor Ronald's vision. They finished what he had started. Perfect Union was released on August 20, 2021, almost exactly 1 year after Ronald Bell's death. Kool said in a statement, "Now that he has passed, that name, Perfect Union, makes even more sense to me. It's about us." He used to say we were the collective genius of a band called Kool and the Gang. The album's lead single, Pursuit of Happiness, was the last Ronald Bell had produced. His fingerprints are all over every note. And then, just days before the album dropped, a second tragedy. Dennis Thomas, co-founding member of Kool and the Gang, also died. August 7, 2021. He had performed with the band at the Hollywood Bowl on the 4th of July. It was described as his farewell performance. Two founders of the same legendary group, both gone before their final album could reach the world. Number 5, Dennis D.T. Thomas, Jungle Boogie, 1973. Get down, get down, get down. Dennis Thomas carried the band's money in a paper bag stuffed inside the bell of his saxophone horn. That is not a metaphor. In the early days of Kool and the Gang, when they were still teenagers playing jazz in New Jersey clubs, when they had no manager and no label, Dennis Thomas was the one who kept the books. He would fold the night's earnings, tuck them into his horn case, and walk out of the venue like a man carrying gold. Because Thomas was a co-founder of Kool and the Gang. Alto saxophone, flute, percussion. and the master of ceremonies, the man on the mic between songs who held the room together with presence alone. He was at every show in every era for over 50 years.
Get down, get down, get down, get down.
When the group opened for Van Halen in 2012, when Jungle Boogie appeared in Pulp Fiction, when Celebration played at the Super Bowl, when astronauts woke up on the International Space Station to the sound of their music, Dennis Thomas was there for all of it. His final performance was on July 4, 2021 at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. Kool and the Gang opening the season as part of CNN's Fourth in America special. The band's statement called it his farewell appearance. He died quietly in his sleep on August 7, 2021 at his home in New Jersey. No warning, no public illness. He had given no indication anything was wrong. He was 70 years old. The Perfect Union album, the record Ronald Bell had built, the album Dennis Thomas had worked on, was released 13 days later. Thomas never held a copy. The man who once carried the band's money in the bell of his horn never got to hold the final chapter in his hands. Number 4, Toots Hibbert, Pressure Drop, 1969. Frederick Toots Hibbert gave the world a word. Not just a song, not just an album, a word that became a genre. In 1968, Toots and the Maytals released a song called Do the Reggae. It was the first time the word reggae appeared on a record. Toots made it up. He took the Jamaican slang word streggae, meaning someone who looked raggedy, worn down, used up, and flipped it into something electric. Reggae, he said, and the world said yes. Toots spent 6 decades building a catalog that defined the soul of Jamaica. Pressure Drop, Monkey Man, 5446 was my number. Funky Kingston, he was a 2-time Grammy winner. He had opened for The Who and the Eagles. He was considered by many the greatest soul singer Jamaica ever produced. And in August 2020, at 77 years old, after a 10-year absence from the studio, Toots released a new album. He produced it himself, his first time producing solo. He called it Got to Be Tough. On Got to Be Tough, Toots addressed police brutality, global injustice, resilience, pain, hope. Everything the world was feeling in August 2020. Toots poured into 12 songs. The album dropped on August 28, 2020. 3 days later, August 31, Toots was admitted to hospital with COVID-19 symptoms. He tested positive, was placed in a medically induced coma, put on a ventilator. On September 11, 2020, exactly 2 weeks after his album came out, Frederick Toots Hibbert passed away at the University Hospital of the West Indies in Kingston, Jamaica. The Recording Academy gave Got to Be Tough the Grammy Award for Best Reggae Album at the 63rd Annual Grammys, a ceremony held in March 2021, 6 months after Toots had died. He was a nominee, he became a winner, and his daughter, Leba, accepted the award in his name and said simply, this is what he would have wanted. The man who invented the word reggae won his Grammy for the album he released 14 days before the virus took him. Number 3, Charley Pride, Kiss an Angel Good Morning, 1971.
friends on the street.
Charley Pride performed at the CMA Awards on November 11, 2020. He sang "Kiss an Angel Good Morning," his signature, in a duet with Jimmy Allen. It was his final public performance.
When you're gone, kiss an angel.
He died 31 days later. On December 12, 2020, in Dallas, Texas, Charley Pride passed away from complications related to COVID-19. He was 86 years old.
Good morning. Love her like the devil when you.
Dolly Parton tweeted, "I'm so heartbroken that one of my dearest and oldest friends, Charley Pride, has passed away. It's even worse to know that he passed away from COVID-19. What a horrible, horrible virus."
Well, people may try to guess.
Charley Pride was country music's first black superstar. Born the son of sharecroppers in Sledge, Mississippi, picked cotton as a child, played Negro League baseball, served in the Army, and then, against every odd the industry could throw at him, became a country music icon.
But I always sing. But you got
Over 40 #1 hits, over 70 million records sold, 3 Grammy Awards, the first black member inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, and Charley Pride was in the studio months before his death. He was recording, actively laying tracks.
let her know you think about her when you're gone.
After he died, workers searching through the offices of his production company in Dallas found reels of tape in a storage room that nobody had cataloged for decades. They were recordings Pride had made in the 1980s, a complete unreleased tribute album to legendary R&B crooner Brook Benton.
But some of them never learn that it's a simple.
The album was called Endlessly. Every song on it was a Brook Benton recording, but Pride's voice on top, warm and aching and unmistakably country. An R&B soul album from a man the world only knew as country, transferred to digital in 2021.
Better know you think about her when you're.
The album was finally released on September 19, 2025, on what would have been Brook Benton's 94th birthday. A lost album found in a storage room, a side of Charley Pride the world never got to hear while he was living.
They try to guess the secret of our.
Music City Records general manager Greg Gosselin said plainly, he was in the studio just months before his death. The recordings were there the whole time, waiting to be found.
Learn that it's a simple thing.
Number 2, Wallace Roney, Blue Dawn, Blue Nights, 2019. Miles Davis only ever chose one protege, one person he trusted to carry forward what he had built, one musician he pulled close and mentored. That was Wallace Roney. Roney was a trumpet player from Philadelphia who met Miles Davis as a teenager at a tribute concert for the legend. Davis heard Roney play and did something he almost never did. He reached out. They performed together publicly only once at a 1991 tribute concert in Montreux, Switzerland. Miles Davis died 3 months later. The torch had been passed. Roney spent the rest of his career trying to honor what Davis had given him, while also becoming entirely his own artist. He incorporated hip-hop influences, neo-soul textures. He led bands that included his 15-year-old nephew on drums. He was not standing still. He was moving forward. His most recent album, Blue Dawn, Blue Nights, was released in 2019. It was a critically acclaimed return to form, dark, searching, deeply modern. By the end of 2019, Roney had new sessions planned, new collaborations in discussion. Then March 2020 arrived. His publicist Lydia Liebman confirmed his death on March 31. I am saddened to confirm that the iconic trumpeter and jazz legend Wallace Roney passed away due to complications of COVID-19 this morning just before noon. He was 59 years old. The only protege Miles Davis ever chose, dead at 59, with new music still forming in his mind. Roney had not been sick publicly. He had shown no signs. The virus moved fast. He left behind decades of recordings and at least one album's worth of work that will never exist. Miles trusted Wallace Roney with a legacy. The virus took him before he finished honoring it. Number 1, Millie Small, My Boy Lollipop, 1964. Millie Small was the voice that gave the world its first taste of ska. Born in Clarendon, Jamaica in 1946, she moved to London in the early 1960s as a teenager, and at 17 years old, she recorded a song that no one was ready for. My Boy Lollipop. Released in 1964 on Fontana Records, the song hit number 2 in the United Kingdom. Number 2 in the United States, sold over 7 million copies worldwide. It was the first ska record to become an international hit, before Bob Marley, before Jimmy Cliff. Before any Jamaican sound had crossed the Atlantic, Millie Small did it. As a teenager, alone, she paved the road that everyone else walked down. After My Boy Lollipop, the music industry was not kind to her. She released follow-up singles that the label failed to promote. She moved away from music, built a quiet life. By 2020, she was living in London. She had recently been speaking publicly about her health struggles. She died on May 5, 2020. From complications related to COVID-19. She was 72 years old. No new album in progress, no unfinished sessions. But Millie Small's story belongs here because the music industry treated her final decades as if she had never done what she did at 17. 7 million copies. The first ska record to break internationally, and she died in a pandemic that most of the world didn't even know had taken her. 10 stories, 10 artists. Some of them left albums, some of them left sessions, some of them left only plans, ideas in a notebook, studio time booked for a month that never came. The virus did not care about discographies. It did not care about Grammy nominations or Hall of Fame plaques or sold-out tours. It took Manu Dibango, the man Michael Jackson had to settle with twice. It took Bishop Rance Allen, who released his final song the day before he died, with a Dream album featuring Kirk Franklin still unrecorded. It took Adam Schlesinger, the day before his Broadway show should have opened. It took Ellis Marsalis, still teaching, still shaping the next generation. It took Ronald Bell, with an entire album waiting to be finished. It took Toots Hibbert, 2 weeks after his greatest comeback. It took Charley Pride, who had an album the world didn't even know existed. It took Wallace Roney, Miles Davis' only chosen successor. It took Dennis Thomas, the man who never let the band forget what they were. It took Millie Small, who gave ska its first global moment and was never given enough credit for it. These were not just musicians, they were vessels, carrying sounds the world needed to hear. And the world ran out of time to hear all of it. Rest in power to every one of them. And if this hit different, hit subscribe, because this music deserves to be remembered.